Hello. So, chapter 3 of Am I Neurodivergent, recapping my unexpected autism and ADHD discovery year and the highs and lows of processing that and the weird journey I went on, first with autism, then with co occurring ADHD, trying to get my head around a diagnosis and what it meant for me going forward. This segment's going to be a bit more on the lows rather than the highs of realizing you're different and reassuring people, I guess, that the lows are okay, that having the lows is okay. So, in the last video, link hopefully up here somewhere, I talked a bit about the what now factor after you realize you think you might be autistic. You've done an online test, either the AQ test, which I'll keep linking to in the description below again, or a different self test. You've probably done some research, you've probably gone down some rabbit holes, recognized what you've read, and come to the conclusion you're not malfunctioning wildly at life, like you've probably always thought. You're very likely just been on the autism spectrum all along. This week I want to linger a bit more on the what now factor post-diagnosis before moving on, because it's a really big moment in your life to discover your brain's not what you thought it was. It's a bit of a Matrix red pill moment that can really pull the rug out from under you, and I don't want to underplay how big of a deal, particularly a later in life realization you're neurodivergent, that is. The main thing I want to get across in this episode is it's absolutely okay to freak out about this. Some people describe realizing they've been autistic or neurodivergent in some other way as a light bulb moment for them. The moment everything that's gone before in their life, all the challenges, misunderstandings, temper meltdowns, or communication difficulties suddenly make sense, like a finger snap, a new lens to look through, and suddenly everything becomes crystal clear. I'm in no way doubting people who say that, and I think for a lot of people it can feel like a delightful moment of self-awareness coming into focus. And in retrospect, for me, that dawning or awakening is 100% a turning point in life. But in my experience, it wasn't anywhere near as neat and tidy as that happy light bulb pinging on. And I think it's okay to admit that struggle. 12 months on from getting a formal diagnosis, I'm 100% comfortable and happy knowing I'm neurodivergent. But it was not a plain sailing 12 months, and it's absolutely okay for it not to be. In the first few months after realizing I was autistic, I pretty much in this order had a stress breakdown, an identity crisis, felt angry with friends and family, felt ashamed, felt embarrassed, had a complete loss of self-confidence. Like, I was a mess. And I think I just want to say it's okay if you're a mess after finding out. You'll probably use the wrong words at first. You'll probably go through times of thinking of it and describing it as a deficit or a disability rather than just a simple difference in cognition and communication. It doesn't help that that's the way a lot of old-fashioned websites still describe autism. They overly pathologize it and focus on autistic challenges through a kind of fairly still exclusively neurotypical lens. And when you're learning all about this from scratch, that kind of narrative, it can colour the way you start to think of yourself, particularly at the beginning. And on the other side of the line, people in the neurodivergent community might then attack you. I've seen it happen for using language like that, like you've just read about, as you find your feet in this new terrain you've suddenly found yourself in. So feeling angry or upset about being autistic, about finding out you're autistic, it doesn't mean you're disloyal to the autistic or ADHD or neurodivergent community if you don't immediately and gracefully pick up a self-advocacy baton and run with it. You can take time to freak out. For me, it would be more weird if you didn't freak out at least a little bit about finding out your brain is wired differently to most other people's. You'll get to a point of being delighted to know this about yourself, but for some people it can take time to get there. and that's genuinely okay. I'm guessing if you're this far into these videos, you probably felt like an outsider, an alien, a misfit most of your life, and there's suddenly an explanation for that, an explanation that's not just you're weird. You're going to go through a huge range of emotions and feelings about that, and not all of them are going to be super positive and optimistic. A friend of mine told me about getting an adult ADHD diagnosis. And the first she became aware of having ADHD was when a therapist kind of casually dropped into conversation that she clearly had ADHD. And my friend initially just blanked the information and didn't engage with it. She later said she felt embarrassed, like she'd been walking around with food on her face for years and no one had told her. And I 100% relate to that, having now been through the process myself. My narrative was that I thought I was nailing it for years, like hiding my challenges well and living my best life. And I was in lots of ways. Like I'm married, I've got a master's degree, I'm a successful civil servant. It's just the effort of doing it was absolutely tearing me apart under the surface in a way very consistent with many neurodivergent people's experiences that I then read about. I genuinely, up until that point, thought everyone had to push themselves through this sort of like push themselves through a cheese grater every day just to get by. It turns out no. Finding out you genuinely are different to most people is genuinely earth-shattering. And again, I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but it's okay to feel angry about that. It's okay to feel like the world's let you down. It's okay to go through a period of mourning about what your life might have been like if you'd found this out about yourself earlier. The different choices you might have made that may have made life easier or happier for yourself had you known yourself better. It's okay to grieve for yourself before you go bouncing down the lane like a happy little neurodivergent bunny. I said grieving, which might sound overdramatic, but it genuinely is grief. It's grief you can feel over the loss of the idea that one day, with enough effort, you'll one day feel normal and be like most of the people you see around you. I mean, you might feel angry and upset for lots of reasons. You might well do what I did and desperately try to grasp at straws to go back through the door you just came through. Like I've changed my mind. I don't want to know this about myself. Give me the blue pill. I don't want the red pill anymore. You know. So like as soon as I self-diagnosed, I was like, right, okay. This answers the questions I've always had about myself. So like, I've always been hugely frustrated with myself for procrastinating and beating myself up for being lazy and useless ever since I was a kid. So I'm now Googling autism and procrastination like crazy. Okay, internet says people on the autism spectrum often procrastinate because they feel overwhelmed by too much information and too much possibility, so get stuck and can't make progress. Okay, that makes sense. What next? I'm going to sign up for an online procrastination course. Sorted. What next? Internet says Myers-Briggs INTP types are more likely than other types to be on the autism spectrum. I'm INTP, but also more likely to have developed sophisticated coping mechanisms to behave and to be seen normally. Okay, again, that makes sense. Now I'm going to dive heavily into Myers-Briggs to figure out how to mitigate my shortcomings to become the high achiever I've always wanted to be, but found impossible and exhausting to consistently manifest, if that makes sense. I also started reading a ton of self-help books on habits of highly successful people to basically be, if anything, more intensely neurotypical. And sidebar, traditional self-help books can be very damaging for neurodivergent people, particularly autistic people, because of our tendency to take things literally and essentially use self-help suggestions as an instructive checklist manual. I've got a whole other video in future on how dangerous neurotypical self-help books can be for the neurodivergent community. But I do want to keep these video chunks brief-ish. So let me come back to self-help books and how crap they are for neurodivergent people in due course. In conclusion, for me, finding out I was autistic did not feel like a sweet relief, an explanation, a light bulb. It felt like a huge inconvenient hindrance to the life I wanted to live. It felt like finding out my mental shoelaces had been tied together from the very start, and that the reason I felt so exhausted all the time was because a mean brain trick had been played on me behind my back. I honestly, a couple of weeks after realizing, felt furious to be autistic, or at least I thought I did. What I was actually furious with was the world for not catering to different neurotypes and forcing people whose minds work differently to feel like failures and less able to influence the things around them, because most people didn't recognize what we were trying to communicate. And we'll get to all that and how we might start to change it. What I want to focus on now, particularly for people early on in the journey of maybe realizing for the first time that they're neurodivergent, is just to say again, being autistic is genuinely awesome in many, many, many ways, which again we'll get to. But when you first find out you're autistic, after you've spent years having no idea you were autistic, it's completely okay to freak out about it. You'll get past the freak out stage and things will get better, but do not feel ashamed of freaking out. You can take a moment to grieve the life you haven't led and won't lead. You've taken the red pill, you've realized you're different, and there's no going back to normalcy now. Eventually, you'll come to embrace that and feel a sense of relief, but don't beat yourself up if that feeling of relief is not immediate. Anyway, I hope that all made sense and didn't offend anyone. And going through this early phase of denial and anger, it was an important part of my journey, and I wanted to be completely honest about what this journey of discovery's been like for me, and also that it might be useful for others, regardless of the reasons you might be feeling upset. So yeah, click the little Saturn, wherever it is, to subscribe and continue on through this journey with me. Thanks for listening to my rambles, and I'll see you next Sunday for the next instalment of this, and we'll get more positive. Thank you.